Hello, everybody, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by DNI Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. It's Thursday at 7 o'clock BST, and we are live on twitch.tv/DNI Stream. I'm your host, Chris Seawalk, and today I'm joined by returning guest, Parul Singh. Hi, Parul. How are you doing?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So, for those of our listeners who haven't heard you before, you have been on before, but haven't had the pleasure of knowing you, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back. I think this is my third one, I believe.
Yes.
So just can't get enough. So I'm a tech recruitment consultant based in Manchester. I've also been learning to do a bit of code, which has been interesting. Bit of a learning curve, to be honest, and hence why I'm here today. So my boyfriend's just coming to the spare room. Every time.
It's all right.
And I'm also a mental health advocate as well. So that's been the basis of, the other two streams that we've done together. So if anybody hasn't seen them, we'll totally recommend checking them out. So in terms of like coding, I've been learning to do a little bit of JavaScript along with my day job. Whether I'm going to become a developer in the future, I'm not totally sure, but I'm quite looking forward to talking about how I've got into it and what I've learned so far, because it's only been a few months for me. So
yes, you're still a baby when it comes to development. So as always, hello to everybody in Twitch chat. Do please get involved. It is a live show, and if you have any questions or comments during the show, we will potentially read them out and get you involved. Before we get going, let's get our icebreaker out the way. This is a question we ask our guests and hosts every week, as long as I remember, at least anyway. And it's something. Sometimes it's related to subject, but most of the time it's not. And it's just to get to know each other a little bit better. So today's icebreaker is: would you rather travel back in time to see your ancestors, or travel forward in time to spend time with your descendants?
I think forward in time, because that was probably the quickest I've actually answered one of your icebreakers. They always have me like scratching my head.
That's the point.
I would say forwards in time, because I really like to see what's kind of like changed. I'm a big advocate of not living in the past. I actually hated history. It was my favorite subject at school. I just think like it's happened. Let's move on. Sorry, totally no offense to anybody that likes history. That's just me.
No. I'm a big history fan myself. I love all kinds of things to do with history. I'm one of them. My mum used to take me to museums and things like that when I was a kid, so it kind of rubbed off on me. And now I'm a bit older, I actually really enjoy reading about the fact that this house it's not that old, but it was 1901 or 1902 this house was built in, and it fascinates me who might have lived here. And it's a simple house, it's just a townhouse, but it just fascinates me that what might have been. Now, in terms of ascendants or descendants, for me, I usually would answer when it comes to future and past things, I would always say yes, exactly. I look forward. I might like history, but I don't necessarily care about. I like to learn from what I've done. But I would actually go backwards, because I'm not planning on having any descendants. And I haven't got any brothers or sisters. So I'm not going to have any nieces or nephews. So really, there's not really going to be anybody after me. I'm the last of my kin, probably. It's not a sad thing. It's a choice that both me and my wife have made. So, it's just not going to happen. But I would probably go back anyway, even if I did, because I'm interested to see what they were like, or not they were like, but what times were like. Because technology and the way that the world works fascinates me. The way that how quickly it's advanced. Just from when I was a kid, there was no internet when I was a kid, and I've grown up with it. I'm part of the internet. I remember back when all this were fields. I remember back in the day when the internet, everybody who used the internet was pretty geeky, We were a small select group, and you were frowned upon for using the internet. It's the same with gaming as well. Gaming used to be a big, taboo. It was like violence in gaming and all the other stuff that comes with it. It was hard to sell it to people, I suppose. But these days, it's just commonplace, and everybody does both of the things. Both the gaming and the internet is it's a primary form of communication these days, for God's sake. So I'd like to see what it was like back then, when they didn't have any of that, knowing what I know now. and saying
But
to them, "Oh, don't worry, the internet will deal with that."
you said that you didn't have the internet growing up.
Yeah, I
Or
didn't.
you don't really remember it.
I remember dialing in to a local computer on a modem, and we dialed into this what they called the BBS, which is bulletin board system, which is kind of an early form of the internet, which was just somebody down the street's computer. You dialed into it, and you could download files, and you could browse message boards, and it was like a have you ever seen CFAX or
No.
teletext, anything like that? So you know when you press the red button on the television,
Oh yeah, that I know.
it was
Yeah.
it was a really basic version of that. You could play games on it. There was all kinds of little, but it was all really basic 8-bit graphics, and that's basically what BBSs were. But you could actually download files. And I remember my first.
Mm.
It's hopefully not going to get me in trouble now, but the first time I downloaded some music back when Napster wasn't a thing, before probably even you even know what that is, before Spotify or any of them things were a thing.
Yeah.
Downloaded Blur Song 2. I don't know if you again know that song, but it's one from the 90s.
I'll check it out.
Anyway, I've downloaded that, and it was about 30 megabytes, and it took 2 days to download it. 2 days for one song. Yes, so there you go. There's a bit of history for you.
Oh, just imagine like now if you want to listen to something, you've got like millions and millions on Spotify for or like £10 a month or something.
It's
So
terabytes of data out there. Got more than that, way more than that. Huge amounts of data out there that's available for us, and that's what's so wonderful. That's why I wanted to get people into the internet when I was younger, because as soon as I realised the power of browse to a website, type in www.something.com or whatever, and see this before even Wikipedia existed, this huge amount of information that somebody had spent time typing into a computer and putting on a computer somewhere that was available to the internet. It was amazing that could happen to me, and that's why I got into tech. Anyway, that was way too long of an icebreaker.
it ties into our discussion anyway.
It
I
does
think
a little bit.
A little bit.
So yes, on to today's show. We have entitled the show "Hello World." For those of you who are not aware, there might be some people who aren't technical listening. Hello World is something that we use in programming to introduce somebody to a new concept or a new programming language. So they might go off and get a screen or a box to output "Hello World," and that gives you the very basics of a computer program. And the reason that we're doing that is that Parul, as she's already said, is a new programmer. You've been doing it for a few months. It's not your main line of business. You don't have a job as a programmer or anything like that. But we want to talk about how to get into programming, which is something that we often miss on this show. Because both Josie and I have been doing it for so long, I can talk all day about the really how to architect a system and how to put a DevOps process in place and all the stuff that surrounds development. But actually, I know how I get into a new language, but I've got a lot of fundamentals already. So let's start with a question. What made you start coding?
I think I think this is actually probably the most straightforward answer to most of the ones that you're going to ask, but because I kind of like fell into tech recruitment head first. I think most people do. You don't go through school and like uni think like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a recruiter because it's hard. There's a lot easier things that I could do, and I think just from the jobs that I'd applied for, I just ended up at the first company that I'd been in until, a couple of months ago, really. And it just happened to be tech recruitment.
Right.
And I remember thinking, the guy who was interviewing me, Ryan, and he was saying like, what do you know about, tech and .NET and all of these things? And I was like, not a clue. But anyway, so then, the week that I was starting, I was a bit like, can I really do this? Should I not have picked recruitment in a market that like I actually know? But anyway, so
but I suppose a lot of the people that you were recruiting for and placing, I suppose a lot of those people were talking to you in languages that or using words and acronyms and things that you just had no idea about whatsoever.
Yeah, and like I'm not gonna lie, they had some really good training at my last company, but one thing is that we didn't have enough time to actually learn the markets. You kind of had to fake it till you make it sort of thing is, ask some like vague questions, make notes on things, and sort of like learn as you go. So it takes you a lot of time to get some credibility and actually be able to have it took me about a minimum of 6 months before I could have a proper backwards and forwards conversation, which flowed, and people were like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. And then when I moved from .NET to JavaScript, I kind of almost had to do it all again, because like obviously like the JavaScript world is, well, the ecosystem's totally different, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fake it till you make it.
So that's interesting. I speak to a lot of recruiters, thousands over the years, and I can tell when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about immediately, right? And it's you can tell, and it's often an often cited frustration of contractors that all these recruiters are blah 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 blah. At the end of the day, everyone has to learn. Everyone
Yeah.
comes from somewhere, and the thing that I like about you, Parul, is that you're trying to learn our language in order to be better at your job. And I'm assuming that's your main motivation for learning to code. Or am
Yeah.
I wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, I probably couldn't pick out just one. I think the main reasons will be, I think number one would actually be like curiosity, right? I went to an all girls school from the ages of 11 to 18. Didn't really have many IT lessons. The only things that we did were Word, Excel, and presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't very good. Didn't even know, kind of about like jobs in tech. And I think if I did, I probably would have gotten into it, because I do really like computers, and I am IT support for my mum a lot of the time anyway, particularly for the last couple of months, since living there over COVID. So yeah, like curiosity, I think, now that I have more exposure to it. And then it does really help me do my job as well. I'm understanding things, like git commands, what people actually use like GitHub for, like the differences between the languages. JavaScript I'm learning at the moment, but I know the difference between that and TypeScript like a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Object oriented programming. Like there's a lot of lingo that I know now that I knew, but I didn't actually know what it meant. So yeah, 100% helps me with my job on like a day-to-day basis. And then also, maybe a slightly more like selfish reason, but it's definitely not the main one, is that it obviously does give me a lot more like credibility, with clients and candidates. And I get a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn and say, look, we've never spoken. I don't really like recruiters, but if I was growing my team, I'd come to you. I've never spoken to this person before. It was just, I'd never got messages like that. And I was just amazed.
I
So
think
I think,
there's more to it than just the fact
yeah,
that you know a little bit of coding. I think you've got a good personality as well, and it's it all goes together. As I said, there's not just one thing in coding as well. It's like, I can tell by the way that you just spoke then about object orientation, JavaScript, TypeScript, that you've learnt a little bit, that you're picking things up. When I speak to a lot of, I suppose it's unique to the recruitment industry, because the people that I would speak to who aren't, trying to place me or trying to find candidates for a particular role would never speak to me or try to speak to me in my lingo. It's like going to France and trying to speak French to a French person.
yeah,
They appreciate it often.
yeah.
Well, maybe not the French, but other.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, they do
joking.
actually. No, they do actually.
But that's what I mean. If you the same goes for someone speaking English to us. If that isn't their native language, we appreciate it because they're trying at the end of the day. Or we should anyway. If not, we're a bit of an idiot, and we should do. But yeah, it's more than just that, and it's again, to me, it's appreciated. I much prefer when I speak to a senior consultant that's been doing it a long time and has picked up enough. But you aren't necessarily a senior consultant, but you're taking a different route in that you're having a look at the code. So I'm gonna diverge a little bit, because I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in how what was the first thing you did? When did you make that decision and say, right, I'm gonna go off and learn this? What was it that sparked that process?
Time. I was finally on. I was towards, well, I mean pretty much all the way through like my last job at my last company. I, very long hours from the time that I was leaving the house to when I was coming back was maybe about 12 hours, maybe a bit more if I needed to go to the gym. Doesn't leave a lot of time, and I was curious for a while. I just literally couldn't do it. And then I handed in my notice, and then I had my garden leave, and then within a couple of days, had some time just to sleep. And then I and then I was looking at a couple of courses on Udemy, and I found this. They had a lot of like good offers on. It was like, I think, the start of COVID as well, so they reduced a lot of courses. So after looking at a few and looking at the different kind of like reviews and things like that, I just decided to buy one. I think it was like 20 quid, down from like 180. So I was like, woo,
Oh,
that's a bargain. And then I just started with it. Like, that was the moment, because I thought, like, this is my opportunity. If I just sit around on my arse, oh, sorry, on my butt.
hey, we
Not
say worse. Don't worry about
one.
it.
I remember I'm not supposed to swear. Yeah. If I didn't actually utilize this time, this precious 4 weeks that I've got to learn something that I've really wanted to for months, I'd be kicking myself. So yeah, that was the moment,
So,
really.
so let's take a step back slightly. Then you said something. Then, why did you want to? Was it? I still want to get to the core reason as to why you, who is a recruiter, who has
Yeah.
taken that path, why did you want to do? I know we've said that
I
there's
just
got to
like
be something in your head that just suddenly went right. I need to pick up more lingo, or I want to do it because I'm want a career change, or I want to do it because there's got to be a
yeah. I
fundamental.
I think so. Maybe understanding a bit about my background might help as well. So I have a degree in chemistry,
Okay.
and about a third, I know that might sound slightly unrelated, but you'd be surprised, like, about a third or even more of it is like physical chemistry. So it's very, very like mathsy,
Okay.
loads of like, physics and things in there. And I think like the logic of programming, well, if you think about more like back end, yeah,
Hmm.
that kind of, I think that ties in with that. And to be honest, I don't use my brain a great deal on a day-to-day basis, and I really miss that. Up till about just over a year ago, I was still like tutoring. So a couple of two students that I was tutoring kind of like through uni that were the year below me. So I got to still have that. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? As like a keeping the brain alive almost.
That explains a lot, and that's good enough for me. I'm happier
Yeah.
now that there's a connection between a logical thinker and a logical brain that wants to learn and wants to process things. My
Yeah.
everything in I this is how my brain works, right? The wife and
Yeah.
I were talking about peanut butter and jam, peanut butter and jelly. The American peanut butter and jelly. We were
Yeah.
talking about how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't particularly like it, but I have
Oh
both.
yeah, is it jelly first, peanut butter
Well,
first?
that's the
They
thing
just
is,
like
I
it.
said, I said, well, why don't you just put peanut butter on one side and jelly on the other side and smush them together, right? Sorted. Right, that's a peanut butter and jelly
Yeah.
sandwich. And my wife went, well, that isn't the best way to do it. The best way to do it would be do half of. In fact, I think she said it first. She said this first. Do half of one slice of bread with peanut butter, and then the other half with jelly, because we didn't want to mush them together and we didn't want to messy the knife up, And then do the same on the other side. And I'm like, but that's like, there's too many steps involved in that. There's too many steps involved in that to make the sandwich. Why don't you just do one side one and one the other? And the
Yeah.
thing is, I explained to her how I
Yeah.
would program that. Right? If I had to program a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I explained to her step by step how it would work. And that's how I process most things in life. Because I'm a programmer, everything has a logical flow of some description. And I
Yeah.
struggle if it doesn't. If it's too,
Yeah.
the rules aren't there and aren't too loose.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think I really like that, and I think I likened I like learned a little bit of like TDD as well. So if you think of it as like a little like science experiment, and you have to like form your hypothesis first before you go away and do what you're going to do, and then if it doesn't work, you have to then go back on it, like change something, and that is TDD. Write the fail and test. Um,
Yeah.
and refactor until like it does work. So
It's not quite, but I was actually talking to somebody about. I'm teaching some TDD and BDD concepts to one of my clients at the moment, and it's actually harder to describe than you think because typical TDD comes from the world of XP, which is extreme programming, and
Yeah.
what that entails is the red-green refactor, which is the loop that you go through as
Yeah.
you're writing unit tests. But the problem is a lot of unit tests that are written, especially in the enterprise, are way too low level, and they require a massive amount of maintenance and a massive amount of overhead to maintain them. So getting the balance right behind the behavior of the system and the granularity and the usefulness and value of the tests is actually quite a fine balance. It's an art to get that right, and it's difficult even if you know the system inside out. I'm in the middle of trying to figure exactly that out for one of my clients, and it's a difficult place to be. So why did you get into, because you've talked about JavaScript a lot,
Yeah.
why did you get into web development specifically? Why not back-end development? Why not full stack development? What's the reason for that?
I might be a bit of like as in you can learn like full stack development, but you know, if I were to kind of like quit now and go into like being a developer, I would either be a, you know, bit more of like a back end or a front end really. And I think people become kind of more full stack. You know, you could be mostly front end with a, you know, touch of Node maybe. So well, first of all, it's the market that I like working. I mean, having pure like back end developers in JavaScript, you know, with just kind of like Node and AWS is pretty rare. You know, it tends to be kind of like front end focused. And I was quite glad to get into that. I used to recruit in like the .NET market, and I was quite happy to change over. And not a dig at any like .NET developers out there. I think JavaScript just suited me like a little bit more, like the people that were you know were in it, the kind of companies that use JavaScript, you know, it tends to be, you know, a lot of like startups and things like that. That's the stack that they go for. And also we're kind of like the idea of maybe being able to then explore a bit of like UX and UI as well. And I like making things like look pretty, you know, and it's quite cool. I really like going on like websites now and using the Chrome Inspect tool, and then I can kind of see, oh, this is what, you know, powers this. Like I think it's pretty amazing. I think it's a bit harder to guess see that in like back end development. You know,
I
it's
think
not.
back in the day as well, there wasn't such a thing as kind of rendered front end. It was basically you wrote some JavaScript or DHTML or JScript or whatever, VB script even in some really odd circumstances, and you'd publish the website, and there was no such thing as bundling, packing things up, asset management, package management, any of the stuff that you get these days with front end development, which is where the minefield begins with front end development.
So much.
So have you done much of that, and have you done much of the things outside of coding, such as the package management and the ecosystems that surround that?
No, I haven't had a chance for that. And you know what? This is probably something that I wanted to talk about in like a bit of depth as well, is that there's a lot of things I'm realizing kind of needed to be on like the coding course, or needed to be a lot sooner. So what I noticed is that they've got things about, you know, like Git commands and things like that, version control, but it's almost at the end of the course. And he said, I've put it here for a reason. And I was like, but why? It's quite important now. And, you know, learning how to use doing things like Jest and like using Jest for, you know, either like unit testing or like TDD. And, you know, I came across all these things for kind of like the first time when I did a pairing session. And I just realized how much I was sort of like missing. But I guess it's one of those, is that.
Well, that's the thing, is every time you speak to another developer, and the same applies to me. I said I've got experience across the full stack, and I know a lot about a lot of things, but I'll never know everything. I'm always learning from other people. I'm always picking up new things. I'm just by teaching other people, I'm learning, because I have to figure out ways to describe particular processes. For example, in the moment, I've delivered quite an advanced Git training course to one of my clients. I delivered it to them. I've offered support as well afterwards as well, mentorship, etc., to people who are using it. And even now, a couple of months after I've delivered the training course, people are still asking me questions about some of the really basic parts of Git. such as branching. How do I do it? How do I create this branch? Why should I create this branch? The problem is it's not linear, and it's difficult to describe things. I'm in the middle right now, actually, just before the podcast. One of my other clients sent me a message about how to rebase something, and rebasing is a crazy complicated subject to explain to somebody who's used to a traditional source control system, because it turns the whole concept of source control management and history management on its head, and it's difficult to describe. The thing is there's always going to be something new in development. You're always going to have new questions, and you're always going to have, oh my god, I've just upgraded this website from Angular 8 to Angular 10, and Angular 12 has just been released, while I've been doing the upgrade. It's always going to happen. And it's
always something new.
That's the mind. That is what makes a good developer. Somebody, one, realizes and accepts that, and two, keeps moving with the time as well, keeps moving. Whenever there's new stuff out there, and doesn't just stay static and go, right, I know C#, I'm going to stick with C# in version 4 from 15 years ago, and I'm going to stick with that. I'm not going to take advantage of any of the new features because I don't need them. That's not the way to develop,
I think though it's also dangerous to want to jump straight into like the new stuff and like the frameworks without knowing like the fundamentals of JavaScript, because I think I have spoke to like, some junior developers that do that. You get really excited about like React and, maybe going into a bit of Vue or Svelte, because that's what, frameworks are there to make your life easier, right? But if you don't know the fundamentals of JavaScript, then, you struggle a little bit further down the line, because it's kind of clues in the name, isn't it? It's a fundamental of it. You should know the frameworks in addition. So I think trying to pick something that I want to learn first, it's almost like I am sort of like a kid in a candy shop at the moment, because I'm literally like, oh, like what front end framework do I want to know? But then I'm like, whoa, hold your horses. Finish learning. I'm still doing a little bit on like objects, and I think I'm on DOM manipulation at the moment, and I need to stop getting overexcited.
That's the thing is, you just mentioned two completely different things there. Objects are important to learn for object-oriented programming, but not for functional or procedural programming. And you could. I mean, thing is as well, JavaScript is not an object-oriented language. It is a prototypal language, which is different. It has objects, but they are not objects in the traditional object-oriented manner. They are prototypes in that they can be extended a lot more freely than traditional objects, which are strongly types. The whole point of objects is that they provide types, which makes it it provides things like type safety, and which become again, it goes into a whole thing, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Hello World and trying to keep it simple.
It is a rabbit hole, though. It is a rabbit hole. I think the realization is, I think for developers as well, I think just knowing that you're like constantly learning, nobody gets to, like you just said, you don't get to a point where you're like, oh yeah, I'm a master, or like wizardry. You master how to learn things as well. If you come across something that like you don't know, you might be able to figure out how to do it in like, couple of minutes, like couple of hours. Whereas for me, it could take like weeks and weeks and weeks to learn that thing. So you get better at Googling stuff.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, Googling originally, to me, when I first started programming, Googling was finding something on dhtml.com and copying and pasting it, and then modifying one or two things, breaking it completely, and then copying it again and pasting it again, and figuring and not really knowing what I was doing. And that's how I started, at least. I'm not saying that's the way you should start. These days, there's a lot more resources out there available to teach you the fundamentals, teach you how to design things properly, teach you how to use an object in the right way, teach you what subclassing and polymorphism is, and all the other stuff that comes in with object orientation. But what is fundamental to all programming languages, even functional programming, which is a whole different kettle of fish, is control flow, understanding if, else, where, while, for loops, for each loops, what the difference is between all of them, and why you would use them in particular circumstances, and how to structure your code if you're using, objects and methods and properties, and learning the terminology around all of that as well. The fact that a method and a property can also be called a member as well in an object. All of these things come with experience. And I said I'm not trying to show off here. It's just that you learn all of the. I don't even know when I learned that property and a field and everything. I didn't know when that was called a member. I can't remember when that popped into my head, but it stuck somewhere in the line.
Yeah, somewhere along the
line. Got a few things going on in chat. I just want to read out, by the way.
Yeah.
Yusuf Code says, spot on with the fundamentals. I've probably spent more than I should have on JS fundamentals, but it's coming in handy now. Absolutely, if you don't get those fundamentals right, you will struggle later on. And I think I did it the wrong way, really. I didn't learn the fundamentals, but I was also there when JavaScript version 1, ECMAScript version 1 or whatever it was coming out, In fact, I remember when ECMAScript wasn't even a thing, and it was Microsoft and Mozilla fighting over the best version of the browser language, which was JScript versus Java. I think it was called JavaScript, the first version. I might be wrong there, so please tell me if I'm wrong. Volshrat's also. Hello, Volshrat, by the way. I haven't seen you for a while, especially on Twitch anyway. I've seen you in Discord. But anyway. So he said, especially when you're a beginner, it's really hard to tell all the things you don't know about from the things I need to know about now. And that can be pretty overwhelming.
I think...
I'm going to say, talk about being overwhelmed by code then.
Yeah. So being overwhelmed by it.
We talked about, like, there's so many things to learn, but how do we manage that? How have you dealt with being overwhelmed? Because there's all these new shiny toys you've talked about. You want to learn them all, but how do you control yourself, or do you not control yourself? How have you coped with that?
That's a good question. I, in general, as a bit of context, I'm a very easily overwhelmed person. I, a lot of the time, kind of want to, I juggle a million things at once in my job anyway, wearing very many hats. So yeah, being overwhelmed is something quite common for me. So especially when I started posting about learning to code a little bit more, on like LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff, started getting quite a lot of people like in the comments, being really, really helpful. But I got, loads of links and things, and they're like, look at this, like use this website. And I've literally got a folder in my bookmarks with about 20 of these things in. And I've actually not been able to look at about 95% of them because I just didn't want to like overwhelm myself. So I figured out the two resources that I'm able to learn from the best. The one is the Udemy course, which I, the first thing that I bought to start learning to code. And then also something that I only discovered a few months ago. So there's a guy called Luke Flannery. He's a North Coders grad, and we've been in touch like quite a lot of various things. And he recommended this site to me called Scrimba. And he said it's a really interactive way to learn JavaScript. And again, we can pop this into the links for like later on. Yep. So it's Scrimba, and it has loads of online courses. What I like about it though is that most of them are free, and it actually has a kind of code editor thing, so you can pause the tutorial, change the code, run it in the mini browser or the mini console, and see what the output is. And I really like that way of like learning, and then you can kind of save it so you can go back on it and like loads of exercises. I
saw somebody on Twitch using something similar recently, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll have to find it, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. And it was basically it was Visual Studio Code, but online, and you could run things that were interpreted as you typed them, and you could type them into, it was like a notebook. There's a language called Mathematica, or Wolfram Mathematica, and it's used for functional programming and statistics and stuff like that, and that comes with things like notebooks, and they make it very easy and quick for you to render the code and output statistics and graphs and things like that. And it's a similar kind of concept but for C#, and I'm sure it did other things as well. I'll have to find it and
definitely. So the videos are quite easy to sort of like follow. So essentially what I do is when I'm on a section of the Udemy course, I also do that section on Scrimba as well. I just save things into kind of like the same folders, and I use, lots of, when you kind of, I forgot what it's called, when you comment something out. Is that all is that what you call it? I just comment.
It's an annotation. Officially, it's an annotation, but yeah, you commenting some code out.
Yeah, so then I, comment like little bits out as well, and it gives me like kind of like nice step by steps to follow. So I would say don't try too many things at once. The next thing that I'm gonna add to that now though is code wars. So I feel like I know a good amount to start doing a bit more. So on the Udemy course, there are like some practical exercises, there are some code alongs, but I feel like this is a little bit more actual, proper, like problem solving. So I'm going to give some of them a go on my own. So for anybody who doesn't know, they just have lots of like little code katas,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just pick them on the basis of kind of like difficulty, and they're actually really fun. And I'm planning to do them as like pairing exercises. And so I'm quite lucky. I have like a lot of people in my network, people like you who are just like so passionate about code, and if they have time, in an evening, they volunteer that to spend an hour or two with me to like help me learn. So I actually did it with one of my clients, and he was the one that taught me like TDD and how to install like Jest and things like that. So I think actually using those people around me has been amazing. So I think that's like probably the next step for me. And then when I feel confident enough, I think React or Vue is probably next. Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
would don't use too many, don't not using like too many things at once, because yeah, it's definitely going to get you overwhelmed. Try different stuff, see what works, see what you enjoy. I like Scrimba because it's really interactive. But at the end of the day, like everybody's different. And if people keep sending you links for stuff, say, thank you so much. I'm gonna pop this on a bookmark and then have a look at it. If you don't like it, don't use it. You're not obligated to.
it's very similar advice to what you kind of get told by other developer streamers when people come and watch you develop. I said I know what I'm trying to do when I develop.
Yeah.
On stream rather, and I say rather most of the time I know what I'm doing when I'm developing. But I mean on stream specifically, I've got a particular goal I want to achieve, and people
Yeah.
come on and they start suggesting things and start talking about things. And yes, it's great because you're speaking to the community and you're engaging with people, and I'm actually learning because a lot of the time people give me links to things and I get a bit distracted. I'm looking at you, Tultepe. And various other people as well, but they come on and they give me links and stuff, and it's just a case of saying thank you very much, but I need to get this done. Even though I am capable of picking up lots of different languages and lots of different frameworks, I know Angular quite well, and I've never really worked with Vue or React, but I could very easily pick them up because I've got experience in lots of languages, and none of them are that different. They've just got slightly differently opinionated frameworks, surrounding them. And you just need to learn that and read the documentation. It's like the testing tools, I've never used Jest, but I've used Karma, and I've used Jasmine, and I've used Protractor, and I've used Mocha, and in various different formats. And I've used God knows how many C# testing frameworks. So I know testing. So
Yeah.
picking Jest up would be. In fact, I've only recently really started digging into Jasmine in a big way. So it's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we've got a few people agreeing with you as well. You said Yusuf said as well. One thing with learning coding or anything is finding one or two quality resources and sticking with them. In my opinion, it's helped him through his degree / self study, and Volstrat's agreed with that, saying that it's good advice once you find the resources that are actually useful for the particular topic that you're looking for, and useful to you as well, I think, specifically.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like there might be different resources that are just really good for like one area. I guess if you're struggling to get your head around like control flow, for example, or arrays in JavaScript, there might be other resources that are better,
I, rem-
than the one that you're using. I
I
don't know.
remember really struggling with arrays when I first started to learn them. I had no idea what they were and how they worked and what they were for. And these days, collections, which basically are more complicated arrays, there are so many different types of collections that are specific and specialized for very particular use cases in C#, for example. There are lists, there are arrays, there are specialized collections, there are generic collections, there are dictionaries, there are read-only versions of all of those. There are collections, which are different from all of that. There are enumerables, there are I-enumerables, there are hash sets, there are hash tables. It's ridiculous the amount of things that there are. But they're all used for very specific use cases, and I'm still picking up or not picking up. They're always releasing new things. I found a new one the other day called a key list, which was so a dictionary is when you look through a dictionary and you go to the index, maybe actually no, dictionary's a bad example. A dictionary has a keyword in it, which is the word that you're looking up, and then it's got a value next to it, which is the description of it.
Yeah.
So that's what a dictionary is encoding as well. It's got a key, and it's optimized for a lookup by key, so you can search. It's to do with how the algorithm's written for the search, but basically the key returns the value quickly, and you can look it up directly on the key. There is a keyed list is a generic collection that you can implement yourself. You have to write your own code for it that allows you to look up a multi-value key. So if you have trying to think of an example, you've got
definitions, maybe.
Sorry?
Something in a dictionary with a few different definitions?
Potentially, that's, I suppose, it'd be that maybe, but that's the thing is, it's the multi-valued key is like it's a composite key, so it's like looking up things in a database based on two fields and optimizing that and creating an index of that. And again, probably going way too deep for somebody who's
technical. This thing with collections, is that C# or is it also in JavaScript?
JavaScript has arrays.
Yeah.
TypeScript has a few different types of collections, such as lists, but generally, I'm pretty sure that JavaScript only has arrays. I might be wrong there, so please do tell me if I'm wrong.
No, that's why I'm asking, is because it kind of, this is one of the, well, not struggles, that's a bit dramatic, but like, for example, these online courses and things are not updated that often, so there's certain things in there that, obviously, like I said before, knowing the fundamentals is good, so nothing's wasted time, but I've spent so much time then going back over certain things that actually nobody uses in modern JavaScript anymore, really. So I think that's like quite difficult because they just make this course, they get all their money, and then like it's literally barely updated. So there's things out of date on there. So I wouldn't know. That's when you said like collections and stuff. I was like, this may well be a thing in JavaScript. I just probably haven't come across it.
From what I can tell, JavaScript has arrays, and then it has typed arrays, and the typed arrays are things like an array of integers, an array of unsigned integers, an array of strings. No, there's no strings. That's what an array would be. I can't see any evidence of other types of collections. Again, I could be very wrong there, though.
Yeah.
And I know for definite that TypeScript has some built into it. However, maybe you do know this, maybe you don't know this, but TypeScript is transpiled into JavaScript. So TypeScript is never actually executed on an interpreter like JavaScript is. JavaScript is the code that is run on the interpreter, which is obviously compiled then into machine code somewhere. But but TypeScript itself is never actually executed. It's read by something, converted into JavaScript. So any arrays, or any collection types rather, in TypeScript will be converted to arrays anyway. There are maps as well, but maps aren't. I don't think they're the same kind of thing. They're for creating two-dimensional arrays of kind of instructions, from what I can remember.
Oh, there's also stuff kind of like, I've seen like tech talks on it. There was one of like the web meetups in Manchester that James hosts, which they had like people from Google come over from like San Francisco. It was like well cool, and they were talking about kind of like WebGL and DeckGL, and apparently like that's incredibly like complex as well. And when you look at like mapping JavaScript, and there's so much that you can do with it. And when you actually think about how much in our life is actually like powered by these things, I don't know how more people aren't like interested in it. And if I'd have known that, I probably would have been as well. And what's great is that it's so accessible, right? I've obviously paid for a course. It was, however, 20 quid. But if you don't have that 20 quid, there's the free code camp, I think it's called, online. That's got some great free resources. And I don't think that you have to have like paid for something. And this also takes me on to another point where actually I wanted to ask you, not my point, sorry, my question. Um, do you think there's any correlation between the educational background of a developer and how good of a developer or software engineer they are?
Yes, but I don't think that a computer science degree or a programming degree necessarily helps somebody become a good programmer.
Yeah.
I think people again who have a more logical brain, who want to solve problems.
Mm.
I don't. I've got to be honest. And people who listen to this show know this. I am not a big fan of education or official kind of training to get you into
Yeah.
anything really, unless it's been a doctor or something that you need a degree to be, and you need a lot, a lot to learn. But programming, I tend to find that every single time I've worked with a student that just came straight out of programming college, or from a computer science degree, they might have got a first. They might know the textbooks inside out. They know
Yeah.
nothing about the real world. They know nothing about the
Mm.
processes involved in software and how software systems sit together, how software is architected, and how to design software and how to design your objects and classes so that they are maintainable, so that they are easy to work with, and so they are extensible. And
Yeah.
learning things like, for me, if I am trying to teach somebody, there are a few fundamental things that I expect somebody to go off and read up on and learn, and that is solid. If this is for object orientation, of course, because that's my main kind of line of business. Solid,
Mhm.
which is the acronym that nobody can ever remember what it stands for, but basically it promotes extremely well designed software, decoupled software, allows you to create testable software and maintainable software, and you don't have to test things to make it testable. You just
Yeah.
have to design your software in a way that makes it easy to do that with.
I remember one. I know. No, hold on. So I know. L is it Liskov's principle, and then O is open close principle, dependency inversion.
Yep.
Um.
I think
Oh,
it's the Liskov open close principle. No, hang on. Liskov
is it?
substitution, sorry.
No. Oh, Liskov substitution principle. Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, it's one of those. Like, I guess if you're prepping for an interview, just from a recruiter's perspective, it's definitely a good thing to know.
No, I'm sorry, but if somebody expects me to know what solid stands for, then
Not
and if I get that wrong, it's a negative for me, then I'm sorry, I don't want the job, because that's not the kind of person I want to work for. The problem is I know solid inside out. I know how to design my objects and my systems with
yeah,
all of the solid principles in mind, because that is how I design my software, because I have learned over 20 odd years of experience that this is the best way to do things. Whether it's got
yeah.
an acronym attached to it or not doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the fact that
Do it.
my output, if you go and have a look at my GitHub, almost everything that I've written, if it isn't in the middle of being redeveloped, is solid. It is well designed. I might have overdone the tests in some instances, but other than that, it is solid. But there's solid, and then there's things like in fact, solid just feeds into everything else. The dependency injection and inversion of control, those kind of things are really important in the enterprise. Not so important in software, your own software projects, but they
Yeah.
are increasingly becoming part of frameworks like React, like Angular. I don't know about Vue because I haven't really looked at Vue,
Yeah,
and I think
I'm gonna
that's.
have a look, so I'll feed back to you.
But yeah, it's that is a fundamental principle that I would always kind of expect someone to understand to an extent. Make your code dry. Don't repeat yourself. Things
Okay.
like all these lovely acronyms that we've come up with. YAGNI, you aren't going to need it. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. All of those things are really important when it comes to designing your software. I'm a bugger for not practicing KISS, though, because I will make something insanely complicated in order to make it extremely solid and make it very maintainable. But that's my own downfall, and I'm aware of it, at least.
Yeah, at least you are. That's it's a big part of it as well. Sometimes I'm like writing code and I'm thinking like what would somebody think if they like looked at this? Would they think that I've taken, too many steps to do things? Is there just too much code there? Could it be 20 lines put into 5? And it may, do you know what, it may well be, but I think these are the things that you learn. Maybe like, you join a company and like you're part of a team and you spend some time doing like pairing and mobbing and like code reviews and things. So I think it's really important not to get too bogged down in thinking like, look, if you've followed like your principles and the design principles and it works and it's tested.
And it comes with experience. You can go
Yeah.
off and learn solid, but if you don't understand what each of those acronyms mean and why they have been defined,
Yeah.
you're not going to get anywhere. And the thing is, you can't know them off the bat, but it's good to start trying to figure it out and try and apply them and try and learn what they mean in practical terms. Try and create a project that's solid, and then ask somebody to do a review of it who knows solid really well, and then they can tell you why it doesn't apply to each of the particular principles. If you, again, I don't know them off the top of my head, but I could probably point them out to you and say, well, let's have a look at solid and let's look at your code and we'll say which one it isn't and which one it is. And I can almost guarantee you that most of it won't be, because you don't know the industry. And that's not a slight on you. That's just because you don't have the experience of it. That's all it is.
Yeah, I might take you up on that one day and get you to assess.
Absolutely happy to do that. I do a code review with you.
Yeah, of course. Let's do it. That's the best part about this, really.
Absolutely. So there's quite a lot going on in chat. We've said, so Yusuf Codes has just said, I think they're all kind of agreeing with us. Yusuf Codes, as a current computer science student, I agree with Chris on that point. I think that was the one about the fact that
a degree,
a computer science degree doesn't necessarily help you. I mean, I did computer science at college, and they were teaching me programming languages from 10 years ago that had died a death. COBOL, Pascal.
No.
Yeah, things that, I mean, although they're still in use these days, I didn't understand the principles behind it. I didn't understand why they were teaching me it, and the problem is with education as well is it's quite often at least a few years out of date, because the syllabuses haven't been updated, as you said, with your courses. Yeah. But official state education is even worse at that, because it's this big tanker that takes ages to do a U-turn on and learn the new technologies. And Volstrat has said, as somebody who's just now beginning studying applied computer science to get a deeper understanding of how things work, I still agree. I think these days, if I did a course, I'd appreciate it a lot more, because I've got the experience of knowing what the real world's like. I'd probably get frustrated, I imagine, with the fact that the course is out of date and I know more than the course, but it's beside the point. I think I would appreciate what they're trying to teach and probably understand what answers they want in the papers, because a lot of the time education, or at least degrees, when you're actually doing your papers and your theses and things like that, they are mostly about getting the answers right from a textbook. Thesis is wrong. That's not what that's about, but wrong term.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got a lot of hate for degrees going on. Degrees and similar courses seem to give you the foundations without necessarily showing you how to apply them. I think that's up to the student to learn and understand those self-teaching through self-teaching and or commercial experience, and that's use of codes again. And yeah,
just a mix of things as well. It's like you properly start learning like when you start to build. And again, pairing with like people that are more experienced. I know I sound like a bit of like a broken record, but because I genuinely learned more from my first like pairing session. I think it was like 2 hours. I think I learned more than I did in like a whole month, to be honest, because it was just the practical, like, let's get our heads down. And we just went through like a code kata and, like why do we do like TDD and, how does that work? Just a few exercises, and it is just really helpful. So, if you're doing a degree and you're doing these things and maybe you're building stuff on the side, I think my advice would be always to things that hiring managers always really like as well is like when you've seen a real life problem and tried to like build something to solve it. It doesn't have to be a full like usable solution, For example, yeah, one of my clients, somebody he was like interviewing, which wasn't through me, but I really liked what he said is that this guy really wanted a Nintendo Switch, and they were all sold out online because everybody during COVID wanted one. And he basically built this, I think it was like an extension with like a web scraper. I hope that's right
Yep,
terminology.
that is a term.
Yeah, which would then give you a notification once it's found a Nintendo Switch like on the internet. He might be listening to this by the way, so you know who you are. But I really like that, and this developer talked about it in like his interview, and the client ended up taking them on because they were like clearly really passionate, really really switched on. It's not a deciding factor, but I think things like that really, really help. And
Mm.
it makes you stand out. Look, the entry level and graduate market is, a little bit saturated. There's less experienced developers. So you've really got to like differentiate yourself, and having these sorts of things that actually like show to somebody is going to make you stand out.
I think that's a key thing that I've always advocated is find a project that you want to do yourself. That you even if somebody else has already written something that does it, figure out how to write something that in the language of your choosing that does the thing
Yeah.
that you want it to do, like the scraper. I'm in the middle of learning Node. Well, I say learning. I've done commercial projects with it before, but I'm relearning, refreshing rather myself on newer versions of Node.js,
Hmm.
Jasmine. So all back-end server development, but I'm also doing it in TypeScript as well. So I'm refreshing myself on how to basically create a TypeScript ecosystem from JavaScript at the moment. But I'm creating a bot for this stream. I'm creating a chat bot that people people will be able to interact with, and they'll be able to change the angles on my guinea pig cameras and things with. And I've got guinea pigs on my stream.
That's cool.
Um,
That's really cool.
but that's because that's how I've always learned. If I've got a new website to write, I'll pick up a brand new language and I'll write it in that. And yes, it'll take me 7 months to write the website instead of 5 minutes with a website generator. But I've learned something. I've took 7 months to expand my skill set.
Yeah, so it's not the actual outcome of have you built something which is really useful and usable, and have you taken a long route to do it, but what you're doing kind of like alongside that, like mental health is like one of my passions. So my first project, which I did start, but I've not had much chance to work on it, is kind of something that brings together like a lot of the different resources. Which I think Mind is similar, but that's quite medical. So I just wanted something where, and then maybe eventually people can make little accounts and sort of like save little lists of things, and then they know what to go to when they're having like certain like issues. Do you know what I mean, if that
Yeah,
makes sense?
yeah,
Or feeling
absolutely.
stressed and overwhelmed, you've got your own little bubble of things that you can go into and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this now. Because I don't really think there's nothing really like that kind of on the internet. I've put it out there now, so if somebody's does it before me, then you snooze, you lose.
So that's the thing is I've come up in my head with all kinds of things, and other people do them because they've got time and the money and the backing and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to have to stop out us now. We could talk all day, but
I
unfortunately,
know.
we are well over time. So I'm going to have to close the show. So we are now at the end of the show, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody in chat. Before we go, though, we're going to do our Bring Your Own manual, which is something that we've learned this week. Doesn't have to be about the subject. It doesn't have to be about coding or tech or anything like that. Last week I talked about the heat death of the universe. So, what have you learned this week, Pearl? Or in the last couple of weeks since I last
I
saw
would
you?
say it's not a fact, but it's advice, and it's about being able to set boundaries, but also being like a nice person about it. I'm a bit of a yes person. I think I always take on tasks that maybe I just can't really like manage, and it's okay to have those conversations and not take on more than you need, especially when your own mental health and physical health is perhaps going to like struggle a little bit as well. You don't want to let yourself get to a breaking point. I've done that quite a lot over the last few months, at nobody's fault but my own. And self-care isn't selfish.
Absolutely.
That's
I
important.
my wife knows that I've got a massive ego, but she knows that I love her to shreds, But if I don't look after myself before I
Yeah.
look after her, I wouldn't be able to do such a good job looking after her, if you know what I mean. If I'm not in the right frame of mind, then I'm not going to be able to give, our family, our animals, and her the love that they need, So I'm a massive advocate of self-love. Yeah, it's the wrong term, but it'll do. Right. So mine this week is actually geeky. Mine is about testing. In fact, I've been doing a fair amount of integration testing this week. I'm a big advocate of testing in general, and it's normally most of the time it's unit tests I'm writing. But this week I've had to write integration tests for something which are awkward to write at the best of times. Some of the tests that I'm writing are particularly complicated and arduous. So I had a issue where some of my assertions, when you write a test, you generally set it up, run the test, and then assert something on the output. So you say, is that object not null, and is the property equal to Jeff, or something like that. That might be a test that you run, right? Bit of a daft test, but it's a test. I found something called fluent assertions, which I was aware of, but I'd never actually taken up. And I think someone on the podcast might have actually mentioned it to me a while ago. But anyway, it stuck in my mind and I found it. Anyway, brilliant, because it's fluent. It is literally, you write something and you say object.id should not be null and should be equal to 1 or something like that, or should be greater than 0, or it's written in plain English. So instead of typing assert.true and then some complicated piece of logic within the true statement, you just write it out like an English, write it out like an English. What's wrong with me? Like, in spoken English, and it's very, very well. So Fluent Assertions in C#, check it out. It's just a NuGet package and it's free.
Fluent It's interesting. If I talk to any .NET developers, I'll definitely let them know.
Yes, good. Okay.
Definitely. That was a easy one.
I think there's fluent assertions for Jasmine as well, and probably Jest. To be fair, most JavaScript frameworks have similar kind of things, so look them up.
I will check it out. Cool.
Okay, so thank you, Parul, and thanks to everybody in chat. It's been a good chat again today. Thank you to Yusuf. Thank you to Volshrat, and I think there was somebody else earlier on, but I can't see them, so tough, sorry. And thanks to those who have followed, even though they've got some dubious names going on today. And finally, thank you very much to Parul for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we'll have you back again at some point in the future.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I'm sorry I always seem to run over with you a little bit. I feel like, we could probably talk for another hour, and I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have me back again soon.
If Josie was here, she wouldn't have had any of this. She'd have cracked the whip 15 minutes ago, and we would have been offline by now, off and gone. But she's not here, so I do what I want. Okay.
Until Josie comes back.
I'm sure she'll listen back to this and she'll be like, right, that's it. I'm going to punish him for that. I was finishing 15 minutes earlier than normal next time. So if you've got anything that you want to promote, any websites, any side projects, if you're working on anything that's cool on GitHub or anything like that at the moment, or you need any help with some code reviews, please do that now, Parul.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the best way to reach me is usually on my LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/the coding recruiter 1. That was the coding recruiter 1. There is apparently another one, so I had to stick a 1 on the end. Fuming. I know. Yeah, so my inbox is open. Add me. You can message me without being connected with me as well. So if you want to offer up, any pairing sessions or any advice, I'd be very appreciative.
Absolutely. I said I'll be up for that as well. So
let's do it.
If I've got any time, and we've got you've got anything cool to get on with, well, it doesn't have to be cool. I love teaching people. I enjoy. I wish I could spend all my time passing knowledge on to other developers and people, but it's not. I can't make a living doing that. I mean, I do a lot of training, but I can't really make that a full-time thing.
And set boundaries because you don't have time to take it on, and I'm okay with that.
Well, no, I do have time to take it on. I just don't have time to take it on during the day. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
There's a distinct difference. I have to make time in the evening, as in, we can do it. Don't worry about it. We can sort that out. Right.
Okay, we'll do that then.
Right, so time for us to pimp our stuff. So you can visit our website at www.dnistream.live. Links to all our social media, all our podcast channels, and all of our podcast episodes are on there. You can also contact us on the website for any reason whatsoever. If you want to be a guest, if you've got a suggestion for a topic, or you've got any comments or suggestions about today, well, about the next show or anything like that, then please do drop us a line on there on the contact form. And lastly, do not forget to follow us on Twitch. So if you haven't already, click the follow button down there or that way, I think, somewhere. And we'll see you well, we might not see you next week, so I've got nobody booked in at the moment. Or rather, I had a letdown at the last minute. Well, not the last minute because there's a week left, but we haven't got anyone next week, so I'll probably be doing a dev stream. I will be back on Monday at about 6 p.m. to do more coding. I'm hopefully getting to some interesting parts instead of refactoring, which is what I'm doing at the moment, because I'm converting from JavaScript to TypeScript for my bot at the moment, so it's a bit of an arduous task to do that, but I'm nearly there. I'm inching towards the more fun stuff, such as getting the guinea pig camera doing things. But I will get there. And we will be back some point in the future. So thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye to everyone. Bye.
Bye.